The calendar turns and another July 25th passes, a date that for many is just another summer day. But for those who knew and loved Lauren Agee, it marks something else entirely. It's the day that the world lost a vibrant, hilarious, athletic young woman. The day a mother's world collapsed. The day a daughter never came home. Lauren Agee was 21 years old when she attended Wakefest 2015 in Smithville, Tennessee. A carefree weekend of lake parties and cliffside camping that should have ended in laughter, sunburns, and Instagram memories. Instead, it ended in silence, in horror, in a body pulled from Center Hill Lake. The official story says Lauren's death was accidental, that she fell while trying to climb down a steep cliffside to use the bathroom, that she landed in the water and drowned. But that story collapses under the weight of scrutiny. It ignores the bruises, it downplays the testimony of witnesses, it shrinks from the questions that still scream out, unanswered, from every page of the case file. Lauren's friends, if we're being generous enough to still call them that, gave versions of that night that don't line up. Her belongings were handled, her shoes mysteriously moved, her injuries didn't align with a simple fall, and yet somehow the investigation folded almost immediately. The case was closed with a shrug and a label, accidental. But we don't buy that. We never did, and we never will. Lauren was funny. She was warm. She was the kind of girl who would blast country music on the boat one minute and pull you aside to check on your mental health the next. She loved her family. She was close with her mother, Sherry, who has become an unrelenting advocate in her daughter's name, fighting tooth and nail against a system that failed her child and continues to fail so many others. And so today we remember Lauren, not just for the way that she died, but for the way that she lived, for the light she brought into rooms, for the people she touched in her short time here, and for the justice she still deserves. To those listening, remember this: just because a case is closed doesn't mean it's solved. Just because the file is stamped and shelved doesn't mean that the truth has been told. Someone out there knows what happened to Lauren Agee. Someone is holding the key to her story. We honor her today, not with platitudes, but with a promise. We will keep telling her story. We will keep shining a light where others have chosen to look away, because Lauren mattered. Her life mattered, and so does the truth. Lauren Agee, forever 21, never forgotten, still demanding justice. Have any thoughts you want to add?
That was beautiful.
Well, thank you.
That was very beautiful.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously today is the anniversary of Lauren's death. So I think it's fitting to remember her today.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely. So there's something especially cruel about cases that echo each other. Two girls, two cars, two stretches of road in the rural Northeast, two disappearances just weeks apart, and nothing but silence where answers should be. It's the kind of parallel that makes you stop and wonder, is this a pattern or just a cruel trick of proximity? Brianna Maitland vanished on March 19, 2004. Her car found rear first into an abandoned farmhouse wall in Montgomery, Vermont. No blood, no struggle, no sign of her. 39 days earlier, and about 90 miles northeast, Maura Murray disappeared after crashing her car along Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. Her vehicle left behind, her scent trail vanishing into the snow. No footprints, no witnesses, just the same gnawing void. Both young women, both intelligent, independent, and navigating life at full speed, and both, to this day, missing. The theories were inevitable. and relentless. Were they victims of the same predator? Was a serial killer stalking that remote stretch of New England at that time, targeting women who wouldn't be immediately missed? Did someone watch them, follow them, know exactly when and how to strike? One name that surfaced early on was Israel Keyes, a self-admitted serial killer who traveled across the U.S. stashing kill kits and targeting victims at random. In 2012, the FBI looked into whether he could be linked to Brianna's case, but ultimately, he was ruled out. Still, the whispers never stopped. Maybe it wasn't Keyes, but could it have been someone like him? Someone less known, less careful, but just as dangerous? We'll also be talking about Brian Rooney, convicted in 2006 of the rape and murder of a University of Vermont student, Michelle Gardner Quinn. He was violent, opportunistic. He lived less than an hour from where Brianna vanished, and he had a history of hurting women. Rooney was never charged in Brianna's case, but there are those who believe that he should have been looked at much more closely. And that's what this episode is really about. Not just the men who might have done this, but the reasons they got the chance, the missed connections, the lack of urgency, the system that didn't think two missing girls in the same region at the same time was worth linking together. It's easy to write off connections as coincidence when you're not the one left searching. But when you are, every similarity becomes a breadcrumb. Every parallel becomes a possibility. This is the part of the story where we chase ghosts and ask whether the real danger wasn't just one person hiding in the dark, but the refusal to see how the patterns keep repeating. This is Dark Dialogue. Let's open the case file, and this time, we're looking for shadows that might have stretched farther than we realized. So, Angela, how's your week been?
Slow.
Yeah? Well, that's a good thing, isn't it?
No.
No? You'd rather be swamped?
Oh, no. I mean, just slow to get from one day to the next.
Oh, it's been moving slow, so it's been a long week.
Yeah.
Now I'm with you.
Yeah.
Well, you made it.
I did.
It is Friday, even though in my brain it's been Monday all day.
Yeah, please don't take my weekend.
I promise I won't. I don't promise I won't wake up tomorrow thinking it's Tuesday, because who the hell knows?
I'll remind you. I'll wake up tomorrow and say it's Saturday.
Okay. So, you feeling ready to jump into this, whatever the hell we're calling this case?
You know, honestly, as ready as I'm going to be for whatever the hell we're calling this.
For whatever confusion that we're about to jump into, because that seems like that's what we always come up with on this case.
It's just a new way to be. What fresh way can we be confused today?
Exactly. Well, I got some stuff for us.
Cool. All right, bring it.
So, listeners, welcome back to Dark Dialogue, the podcast where we unravel the shadows of the human mind and dive deep into the mysteries that haunt small towns and big cities alike. I'm your host, John.
And as John said, I'm Angela. Together, we shine a light on the stories that don't add up. The disappearances, the cover-ups, the forgotten cases that keep scratching at the back of your mind.
So far in our investigation into Brianna Maitland's disappearance, we've explored her final hours, the strange and unsettling crime scene she left behind, and the web of drug connections and personal conflicts that may have pulled her into danger. But now, we widen the lens.
This is episode 5, Serial Killer and Maura Murray Theories. We're examining the possibility that Brianna's case isn't isolated, that it might connect to other disappearances and unsolved crimes, including the case of Maura Murray.
From Israel Keyes and Brian Rooney to whispers of human trafficking and predatory patterns, we're sorting fact from fixation and trying to figure out if the monsters in these stories were real or created in the vacuum left by silence.
So grab your headphones, brace yourself, and get ready to follow a trail that bends through the darkest corners of possibility. This is Dark Dialogue.
Let's step into the unknown.
You know, I've been meaning to bring like a giant teddy bear to just hold for crap like this.
Have you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we might have to have like an office teddy bear. Something like that. Of course, it'll probably scare the shit out of me every time I walk in here and see it.
Probably.
Yeah, I suppose I can I suppose I could live with that if it gives you some comfort to talk about this creepy shit.
So sweet.
All right, so, I've alluded to the fact a couple different times in some of the previous episodes that we're going to have to cross this bridge sooner or later because it doesn't seem to matter.
I don't like this bridge.
Well, the main reason I don't like the bridge is I don't think that it applies at all, really, to either of these cases. We already discussed it in the Maura case. I pretty much told you last week in Brianna's case how I feel, but it's so prevalent out there that it has to be discussed. Otherwise, we're just not doing our jobs.
Correct.
So the first asshat that we got to talk about is the same asshat that you got to talk about pretty much in any murders through the early 2000s, the late 90s to the early 2000s, and that's Israel Keys, because the creepy son of a bitch freaked everybody out by being such a weird, unique, strange,
everywhere
pile of shit that, to your point, that traveled all over the freaking place.
Yeah.
That everybody that pops up during that period of time as murdered or missing is...
Could it be?
And I mean, the fact of the matter is that he was up in this area. He killed people not too far from Vermont and New Hampshire. So it's not just a crazy out of this world conspiracy theory like some of the shit that we talk about. I mean, this one does line up, but his timeline doesn't. We talked about that in Maura's case. I don't really think that it's necessary to go over it again for this case because it's exactly the same thing. The FBI looked into it. They looked into the time frame, and they come out and said in 2012 they come out and cleared him essentially for this. And they just said
he's one of the few that they've just given all the information about, right?
Oh man,
they're just not holding anything back about him now.
No, I think a lot of the reason for that is he offed himself. He's dead.
Well, yeah, but
you don't have,
they still just let it go.
But you don't have pending appeals and shit like that they need to potentially hold evidence back for in case they had to retry him or something else happened, or if they discover more bodies that they can link to him, then they would obviously have to charge him and go through the whole process. But that's non-existent with this piece of shit because he killed himself. And so I think that's one of the reasons. And I think another one of the reasons is the FBI's in the same boat as everybody else in the country. This son of a bitch was everywhere. I mean, I don't even know if we know how many states that he was in, but
I think so.
He was in the vast majority of the lower 48 and Alaska.
And left caches everywhere.
And so, unlike a lot of serial killers that are either within a certain geographical area, like Ted Bundy for a large part of his killing spree. I mean, we talked about him on Rocky Mountain Reckoning, and he did some moving around and everything, but not like Keys.
Yeah.
Or Richard Ramirez, who definitely stayed pretty much 100% in one area. Or you have, people like Clark Perry Baldwin, who were truckers, or Robert Ben Rhodes, who killed along trucking routes, or, so if you find a body that's off an interstate somewhere, it could link to that. But if you find a body way off in the middle of nowhere, probably not going to be one of those two assets.
Yeah.
This son of a bitch was all over the place, killed in a myriad of different ways, really didn't have a signature. So
he had a goodie bag of stuff, and it's just however he felt that day.
And his goal was to just kill. He didn't have a target.
Yeah.
He just killed everybody. And so it's difficult for the FBI to look at these cases and say yes or no, unless they can prove that he could not have been in the same area at the same time.
Right.
Which is what they've been able to do with like Maura's case and Brianna's case, and just say, no,
it's not Keys.
He was probably killing people in Utah during this period of time, or, in the, within, I think that he put almost 500 miles on that car. So within 250 miles of Salt Lake, which includes Idaho, Wyoming, I think Colorado. I mean, so there's a pretty freaking big area that he could have been in, but he sure as the shit didn't drive to Vermont or New Hampshire.
500 miles.
In 500 miles, right. So it doesn't fit. It was not Keyes. There's really no doubt about it. I did see a couple of podcasters that question Keyes's timeline that the FBI released. And I mean, if we're going to go down that route, then absolutely anything is possible. I mean, if it's a little bit irritating to me. I certainly don't want to attack, people within our genre, but I think it's worth mentioning that if your whole goal is to prove your theory correct, then what's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, shit, we could all do this. I could say, I strongly believe Brianna was abducted by aliens, and I'm going to ignore absolutely everything that doesn't prove that she was abducted by aliens, and I'm only going to talk about the shit that does. I mean, the FBI have no reason to lie about the timeline, and like the FBI or don't like the FBI, I have some pretty freaking serious problems with the FBI. But one thing that they're pretty freaking good at is tracing down like financial records and shit, knowing that he flew into Salt Lake on this day, knowing that he rented a car on that day, knowing what the mileage was on that car when he left, when he brought it back. I mean, It's not that difficult. So I don't know. But again, if we're going to do that, then all theories are on the table and we're never going to prove any of them because everybody's just going to pick their pet theory and run with it and discount everything else. A hell of a lot bigger table because that's going to open the door to everything.
Yeah.
So Israel Keyes, in my mind, is 100% out. And at this point, unless the FBI come out and said, wow, we got this completely wrong, and now we can, I don't think there's anything that can convince me otherwise. So with that, we're done with that son of a bitch, at least for this. I don't think there's anything else to say about him unless you do.
No. Hallelujah. Let's be done with him until we absolutely have to talk about him again.
Yeah, and
disgusting.
Eventually we might cover him, but the only reason that I would do so is to cover his victims.
Well, yeah.
To honor them.
Yeah, we don't honor the douchebags. We honor the victims.
Yeah, and to me, I really could give a shit less if people click on it or not because of who we're covering, because that's not why we do this. We decided that from the very beginning. So I have no doubt that if we did an expose on Israel Keyes, that we'd get a whole shit ton of views because he's a pretty famous name anymore.
Yeah.
But what's the point? I'd way rather cover somebody that nobody's ever heard of before and get a story out there for a family or a victim that nobody talks about. This piece of shit
that needs help.
Yeah. And let's be honest, there's a ton of shit out on Israel Keyes. So it's not like his victims haven't been talked about and stuff. I mean, it's tragic and sickening what his victims went through.
Yes, it is.
It wasn't just, and you really could say that about any killers, but he drew it out. That girl that he kidnapped up in Alaska, he held her in that shed in his backyard for days before he killed her. The poor couple that he kidnapped and murdered in the Northeast, he took them from their home. He took them to that old abandoned house. He, sexually assaulted the woman. And it was torturous. It wasn't a quick kill. He was a sick, sorry son of a bitch. So the next sorry bastard that we got to talk about then is Brian Rooney. Not nearly as well known as Israel Keyes for sure, but he, like I said in the intro, was convicted of murdering a girl by the name of Michelle Gardner Quinn, who was a 21-year-old student at the University of Vermont in Burlington. So not far away. I think we determined it was about 40 miles from where Brianna was living down to Burlington. So we know that Brianna was in Burlington the day that she disappeared with her mom. That's where she went and took her GED exam and everything, and
did some shopping.
Right.
Had a meal.
Had at least a meal. I suspect two, but whatever. And where possibly some weird visit from a strange person happened.
I'm rearranging furniture, by the way.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah, okay.
Either happened or didn't happen, and I don't think we're ever going to know, and I don't know how relevant it really is, but it's close. And he killed Michelle Gardner Quinn in 2006, so obviously he's active in the area in 2004, and was then sentenced in 2008 for the strangulation and sexual assault of Michelle. So he's an active sexual predator working in the Vermont area during that time. He was there in the state in 2004, and he was investigated in Brianna's case. And I was watching an interview with Greg Overacker, who, if you remember, is the private investigator that's been on Brianna's case since 2016. No, 2006. Sorry. And he seems to think that there's reason to dig into this guy a little bit farther for both Brianna and Maura's case. So we know that Brianna and his known victim, Michelle, it was a very similar victim profile. They were both young women. They were both alone at night. But it's really a tough one for me, because to say that the circumstances are even similar to me is a huge leap. So Michelle was walking down the street and apparently asked this piece of shit if she could use his phone to call for a ride or something. And he let her, and then the two are seen on security footage walking away together. And then she is found murdered.
Sorry, I didn't know who he was, so I looked up the picture. Just creep.
Yeah, he's a creepy bastard. So to me, there's no similarities there whatsoever. That she was definitely a victim of opportunity who came up to him and asked to use his phone, not putting any blame on the victim. No. Just a huge difference between that and how Brianna disappeared, where her car was off the road. We talked about all that last week. So very, very different as far as that goes. Same with Maura. Now, could you make the argument that both of those were opportunistic abductions as well? Well, you could. Like I said last week, I think you could make that argument for Maura's. I think you're going to have a whole hell of a lot harder time making that argument for Brianna's, at least if you're trying to convince me.
Right.
Because I'm going to say, okay, but how did you get her off the road and into the barn? Because it wasn't just an accident like we talked about last week. There's no way. I don't need to go all over it again, but it's not possible that it was just an accident, that she just happened. And then even if it was, let's just pretend that the car was in nose first into the barn and it looked like she ran off the road. You're telling me that this guy happened upon two women 90 miles apart, both of them after they'd wrecked their car before they were able to get help to the area? I mean,
it seems like serial killers are lucky, but that's a lot of luck.
That's an unbelievable amount of luck. And, I think that, honestly, that is something like that, I believe, is probably more applicable to a pedophile than somebody that targets older girls.
Yeah.
If you look at like serial killer patterns who focus on young college age girls, this victim type, they're usually not opportunistic in that regard. They're usually hunting. I mean, are they out there looking to see if opportunity presents itself? I mean, when you're talking about like Ted Bundy, when he was at Lake, whatever the weird ass name is, Sammamish, or I can't remember off the top of my head with that.
Swinomish?
Some shit like that. And
people in Washington are like, come on.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. And just like when we're in the Northeast and we're talking about all those Indian names from out there, and we can't pronounce any of those.
Yeah.
But, you know, when he was at that lake, it was kind of a combination of both. He was pretending to be injured and asking girls to help him get his boat loaded on his VW. And so he was hunting, and then if a girl said okay, then he capitalized on that opportunity and then kidnapped him. I mean, we know that he did 2 in one day from there. But that's a lot different than what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here, I think, like I said, would fit more with like a pedophile who maybe doesn't go out hunting. They kind of go out, they watch kids, they do all their sick shit, but it's not until one of those kids comes and knocks at their door that they actually act on it, or until one of those kids, you know, wanders off by themselves and they're able to convince them to, I don't know, come and look at the puppy they have in their van or whatever, shit like that. So it seems to fit that profile a little bit better, but the 2 cases in my mind, which I've said over and over again, are so different in that Brianna was wrecked and she was vulnerable. Brianna, I think I made it very clear. I think I said it like 47 times throughout the episode that it was no accident.
Oh, you mean Maura was wrecked?
Maura was wrecked. Did I say Brianna? Yeah. So Maura was wrecked on accident. Mm-hmm. And Brianna, I just don't think it was an accident. I think we covered that last week. But and then he was also charged with sexual assaults. Rooney was also charged with sexual assault on a minor and lewd and lascivious contact with a child in St. Johnsbury and other counties, and he's suspected in other counties. And so we think that he was definitely a sexual predator that was operating in that area at that time. And if he would have happened upon Maura and Brianna in a vulnerable situation, he probably would have done the same thing. I just think it's unlikely that that's what happened.
Okay. I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but when I first saw him, I was like, oh yeah, he's a sexual deviant predator. He just had that look.
I don't really agree with that.
Really?
Not that he's a creepy looking bastard, that you shouldn't judge somebody by the cover, because in my mind, that's the intuition that keeps you safe.
That's true.
When somebody comes up and talks to you and you're like, okay, you're freaking creepy, and you don't know why, but you're just like, something's wrong with you. That's when you should definitely listen.
Yeah, but I was just looking at a picture and
still say the same thing. Okay. I mean, you know, on that Rocky Mountain Reckoning episode when I put the slides together of all those creepy bastards and put them up on the TV, granted, we know that they're all serial killers, but you're going to have a hard time looking at any of those pictures and not being like, holy shit, that guy's, oh wow, that guy's a creepy looking bastard. Yeah. I mean, it's true.
Yeah.
And, you know, you hear surviving victims of these bastards all the time, and the one almost continuous description that you'll get out of pretty much every one of them is their eyes were black. It was like they weren't even human. I don't know how many times I've heard that listening to victim statements. And so I think there's something to that shit. And if you go looking at pictures of like the serial killers and stuff, you can see it in those pictures.
Yeah.
You can look at their eyes and you can just tell there's no humanity behind them.
Yeah.
So I think judge books by their cover.
Judge killers by their cover.
At least in this setting, if you have a bad feeling, trust it. And then the next one would be Howard Godfrey, and he was convicted of murdering Patricia Scoville in Vermont in 1991. He's a known sexual predator that was active in the state during the early 90s. He targeted young women that aligns with Brianna's profile. He was investigated in her case, and he was considered due to his Vermont presence, his history of being a piece of shit, but it just they were never able to come up with any kind of evidence that would link him to Montgomery or to Brianna. And his 91 crime is a long ways from 2004. Whether we have more victims in between that time or not, potentially, but that's a long gap. That's a unbelievable cooling off period. But he was at least temporarily suspected, and he, when you go to digging into like Reddit threads and online theories and shit like that, his name does pop up. And I couldn't find anywhere where necessarily the police or the FBI seriously investigated him or considered him. Maybe that's an oversight, but I tend to think that they probably are looking at it in a similar way to me, in that it's so freaking unlikely that a serial killer is to blame for her disappearance that I don't know if that's the best place to be spending the resources in her case. And I realize that Greg Overacker probably knows more about this case than anybody else in the world, because he's literally been working on it since 2 years after she disappeared. And he, at least in this interview, which was done a couple years ago, so I don't know if things have changed, but at least in that interview, he was entertaining the possibility that the two cases, Brianna's and Maura's, could be linked, and it could link to Rooney. I mean, he didn't say Rooney's name, but it seems pretty clear that that's who he's talking about. Wow. But I have no problem disagreeing with anybody. If that's my opinion, then that's my opinion. And my opinion is it wasn't a serial killer.
Okay.
So
you've made it pretty clear.
I think
we're good with it. Well, I haven't taken an official poll, but
so then when you talk about any other potential serial killers, the only other would be an unidentified serial killer, somebody that we don't know. And there's a theory out there that I've heard, and I haven't really, how do I say this? I don't know exactly who put this theory out, and I don't want to like badmouth them or anything because I haven't really dug into the theory. But the reason I haven't dug into the theory is because the theory is a serial killer that leaves no evidence, in which case there's nothing to dig into. And so there's nothing to waste my time with. Right. It's kind of like the smiley face killer theory, which I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but not the happy face killer, the smiley face killer. And the theory is that there's somebody that has been killing, I think, primarily lone men near water in all of these different places. And there's been multiple smiley faces found near where the bodies are found or something. And so, I mean, there is like a calling card, at least in that one, something you can kind of hang your hat on.
Yeah.
But when I dug into that, and it's been, I don't know, a couple, 2 or 3 years ago that I really dug into it. But when I did, it was reaching at best. You know what I mean? Like, there was a couple of them where a body was found, and then like 2 blocks over and 3 blocks up, a smiley face was found painted on a building. And it's like, well, shit.
Tagged.
I could have found, I guarantee you, I could walk downtown in like any major city, and to your point, where there's graffiti, and somewhere I'm going to find a smiley face. Like, it's not an unusual shape to show up in graffiti or to be painted on garbage. I've seen freaking smiley faces painted, especially after hearing that and like digging into it. Now I see smiley faces literally everywhere. And so unless it was right there where the body was found, and the police could say, yeah, this was painted within the last 24 hours, because several of the pictures I saw, you could tell it had been there for like 6 years. So you got somebody that's out painting smiley faces and then waiting 6 years to kill somebody. And I mean, it was just a big reach. And again, I'm not saying that all of those cases aren't committed by one person, because victim profiles and stuff do match, and a lot of them were found in water. A lot of the cases were chalked up to accidental drownings from being drunk. And so there are a lot of similarities. I'm not just discounting it and just saying it's a stupid theory. I'm just saying it's a reach to link all of those. And when you say a serial killer that leaves no evidence, well, that's impossible to prove.
Mm-hmm.
By its very nature, it's impossible to prove.
Yeah. And frightening.
It's frightening, but also unlikely. In this day and age.
Yeah.
It's pretty unlikely. You know, we've got a douchebag over in Idaho that was just sentenced this week to 4 life sentences for the murder of the Idaho college students.
Co-murder.
That douchebag was, he was going for his doctorate in criminology. He'd already received his master's degree, obviously. He was going for his doctorate. But my point is, he knew evidence to, to a tremendous degree. He was going to be a doctor of criminology. And this dumbass leaves his DNA on the knife sheath. And
good job, Brian.
So, yes, thank you so much for that, by the way. But my point in that is committing multiple murders and not leaving any evidence in this day and age is extraordinarily difficult. Maybe in 1959, we didn't have DNA. Pretty easy, really, to do. Even if you leave your blood at the scene, is all they're getting is a blood type out of it.
Yeah.
Now, multiple times, that would be so hard. I don't know if you've seen the movie with Sandra Bullock, where she's a cop, and those 2 high school kids decide that they want to kill somebody.
Murder by Numbers.
That's the one. Yep. And they get all up in their little zoot suits and try to do it, and dude still pukes and leaves his DNA. I mean, DNA, you would almost have to be completely covered head to toe in plastic to ensure that you're not going to leave your DNA. And sooner or later, you're probably going to cut your finger. You're probably going to miss a hair.
Yeah.
I mean, in this day and age, to be a killer that leaves no evidence behind, damn, that would be tough.
My hair betrays me so much, I would be caught before I even did it.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to be like me. And for those that have never seen me, because I'm the mystery man, my head is shaved, but I do have quite a bit of facial hair. So that would have to go. You would have to literally, I think you'd almost have to shave your entire body or buy some Nair if they still make that shit. Or
I don't know.
I don't know either. That's, But you know what I'm saying? You'd have to pretty much get rid of all of your body hair to be sure that you're not leaving any hair behind. And then touch DNA.
Still gonna leave skin cells, yeah.
Yeah, you're still gonna leave skin cells. And, Kohberger is a perfect example.
How about you just don't do this shit?
Yeah, how about you just don't do this shit? Yeah. Well, my point is, if you have a serial killer that is killing multiple victims and not leaving any evidence, again, I'm not saying it's not possible, but holy shit, is it unlikely.
I will also add, if I come in here and your face is fully shaven, I'm running the other direction.
It's going the other direction. Actually, I don't know if you've noticed, but yeah, it's going quite a bit the other direction.
I'm just saying, electrician, shaven face. You're not looking good at that point.
I research serial killers for 20-some hours a day.
Count because I do that too, but
no, you're safe. But my point is that, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Are we ever going to know? Obviously not. Not unless he screws up and leaves evidence.
Yeah.
In which case, he's only going to get caught for the one he leaves evidence on, if that's such a thing. But I have a really hard time buying that theory because of everything that I just went through. I think it's almost a silly theory. And you could say that about all of them then. You can pretty much just pick all of the, we've talked about the faces that we have up on our studio wall up here. And I could just say the same thing. We have a serial killer that doesn't leave any evidence. He kills them all exactly the same way. Do I think all those cases are related? No, I really don't.
Yeah.
I think some might be, but I don't think they all are. But you could make that argument. I mean, you could look at all of the Great Basin victims that we're covering in Rocky Mountain Reckoning. Take out the ones where there's been convictions, but all of the rest of them, you could all throw in one big pile and say, and you could find similarities between all of those, and you could say it's definitely one serial killer, and they did.
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about this Great Basin serial killer, is because at one time the task force thought they had one serial killer, and then they reached the same conclusion that we have reached, and that is it's actually multiple that are operating in the same area. But my point is, you could always do that with any set of victims.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard to find.
You can tweak the narrative enough to make them all match.
Of course. It's pretty hard to find murder victims that don't have some similarities. You know, obviously, cops and investigators aren't looking for anything that could be similar. They're looking for signatures that are definitely linked to each other.
It's got to be importantly similar.
Right. But if
that's a word. If not, it's mine.
Importantly?
Yes.
Importantly. I think that's a word.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a word.
I'll keep trying.
But, you know, if you're not an investigator and you're not thinking that way, then just pick out 10 murder victims and I'll link them. I'll tell you, oh yeah, well, they all had a middle toe that was longer than, you know what I'm saying? Like, you could find similarities if you're looking for similarities.
Yeah.
But it doesn't help. So if we talk about the potential connections between Brianna and Maura, I mean, obviously their locations are huge, you know, they're not very far away. They're only like 90 miles away, but that doesn't mean a whole lot, just because everything else being equal, two murders that happen within 90 miles of each other don't really factor in for me at all. I think it's irresponsible actually to link them based on that by themselves.
Well, and that's part of the narrative. At this point, we don't even know that they're murders.
Right. I mean, they're disappearances. We don't.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to get into that a little bit farther down. It's not crazy talk that you're saying that, you know, we don't know. In both of their cases, human trafficking has been brought up as a potential. So, and that's tonight's episode. We'll be talking about that here in a little bit. So,
oh, gross. Where's my teddy bear?
It's not crazy. So you have the locations of 90 miles. I've already said that by itself doesn't count for a lot. But then you have both of them being similarly.
I got it.
Yeah. About the same age. We've got two women that are about the same age.
That's the only reason I'm here.
To correct my... Yeah, when I can't talk. Well, thank you for that. You know, Maura is a little bit older than Brianna, but, you know...
Not a lot, though.
Well, just visually, if you're looking at somebody, you know, a 17-year-old girl and a 21-year-old girl, a lot of the times you can't freaking tell the difference. You know, in these days, you could say even like some 14, 15-year-old girls compared to 20, 23-year-old girls, you know? So, I don't think that the age difference matters one iota, because they're definitely in the same age category, you know, of late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
And that is, as we know, that is a prime victim for like serial killers. I mean, as scary and as sad and as sick as it is, that's really the prime category to fall victim to a killer like this, whether it be serial or opportunistic. It's sad, but that's who they target, is typically younger women. And so in that regards, they fit. And then, so there's similarities in their profiles. If you look at their circumstances, both of them, if I give you the fact that Brianna wrecked, you could say both of them wrecked on the side of the road, left in a vulnerable situation. And so there are some big reasons that these two cases should be looked at as potentially being linked. I think it would be very irresponsible to not at least consider the fact that they could be linked, just simply because there are a lot of similarities between the two cases. We know that where I'd come down is that they're not linked, but if I was tasked with investigating either one of these cases, I would have to consider the possibility that they could be linked, because unless you know for a fact that they're not, then you're turning a blind eye to a potential that I think is high enough that it needs to be strongly considered. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in both of those cases, however, I think that I can comfortably say that if they were linked, it would have to be an opportunistic killer. I don't think that it could possibly be a killer that targeted each one of these girls separately. And the reason for that is, outside of their physical attributes, both of them being young white women in their late teens, early 20s, similar body shapes, both of them being, relatively petite, athletic women. Outside of that, there's nothing that really ties them together. You've got Maura, who's working, I don't think it was a full-time job, but next to a full-time job as campus security. I'm not entirely sure exactly what her job entailed, right, but she's working a consistent job. She's going to school every day. Brianna is completely different. Maura has stable housing. She's living in the dorm. Brianna really has none of that. She's couch surfing. She's all over the place. Nobody really knows where she's going to be staying from one night to the next.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure that she knew.
She doesn't have specific goals like Maura did.
Right. She's not enrolled in college. She was doing the GED program, which was through a college, but totally different.
Right.
And then she was working two jobs, but that was a new endeavor. There are two jobs, completely different towns. I think by the time you drive all the way around, it's like 60 miles from Montgomery to, I can't remember where her second job was at, but it was clear kind of around that road, that 118, and then south of where she was living. So it was a pretty good trek. She kind of lived, I guess you could say, in between the two jobs. Okay. So she could drive to either one of them and it wouldn't be anything crazy, but to drive from one job all the way to the second job is a pretty good trek. It could be done. Obviously, it's like 60 miles or something like that, but it's quite a distance. Other than what I said, I don't think that they would be linked. So if it was a single killer, it would have to be opportunistic. It seems very odd that this one killer would find both of these girls, follow them, target them.
Yeah.
That one is a tough sell for me. So it would have to be opportunistic. He just happened to come across them. And I guess you could say that you have a killer that targets young women driving alone and somehow has a way of running them off the road without leaving a trace. But we talked about that last week. How likely is that?
Yeah.
I just think it's very unlikely. I don't think it could happen, frankly. We talked about Maura's car being wrecked. We talked about my theory, at least, that Brianna's was most certainly not. I mean, it was wrecked, but not like ran off the road wrecked.
Right.
So
meticulously wrecked.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't ran off the highway and wrecked. It was wrecked after pulling off the highway, in my opinion. We talked about that last week. We don't have to go through it again, but so then you have another factor that you have to consider as a difference between the two, and that is that, Maura, no matter what, as far as what she was struggling with at the time, was a relatively straight shooter. She was drinking some, and she had her issues with stealing the makeup from Fort Knox. So I'm certainly not saying that she was a saint by any stretch of the imagination. But when I'm comparing her to Brianna, I'm not saying that Brianna was a worse kid. I'm just saying that she was running with a much rougher circle of people than what than what Maura was. Again, just a big difference from the circumstances in which they were living. You know, you've got Brianna, who's living more of a, I can't say more of a party life, because college, there's a lot of partying, and I think Maura partook in that as much.
Nomadic.
But yeah, more nomadic and more, I don't know, there's a big difference between going to a college party where a bunch of kids have a keg or whatever, and they're doing keg stands and dancing around and acting like idiots, and going to a party at a known drug dealer's house and doing hard drugs. We're talking about crack cocaine. That's a freaking hard drug. And so that's a big difference in my mind. Huge. It's not even the same. You can't even say it's the same thing. It's like, you know, going to a bar and going to a strip club and saying it's the same thing. It's two totally different things. Yeah. Just the fact that there's alcohol at both places doesn't mean that they're in any way similar to each other. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, they serve alcohol at Olive Garden, so it's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing. And then, you know, you do have the geographic gap of 90 miles, which I said at the beginning it's close enough to consider it, but yet it's far enough away that if all the listeners think of a city or a town 100 miles away from them, you know, like if we say Billings, for instance, Billings, Montana, if there was a murder that occurred here and a murder that occurred in Billings, in no way would I say, oh, well, they must be linked because they're 100 miles apart.
I would say might.
I'd say could be.
Possibly, but not, oh, that's linked.
It would not be my first,
so you get more information.
Thing I would jump to. And, you know, if you live in an area like in the Front Range in Colorado, for instance, if there's a murder in Fort Collins and a murder in Denver, unless there's a bunch of circumstances that align, you're not going to say, oh, they've got to be linked. It's just irresponsible, I think, if you do. Now, if there are reasons to link them, then yeah, they should be linked, but it's not the distance, I guess is my point.
Geography.
Yeah, that's not the reason you're linking them. Now, if there is a murder at 3201 A Street, and then there's a murder a block away on B Street, okay, well then that geography is completely different than 100 miles away. In that instance, I would be like, oh, I wonder if these are linked. These probably are the same person that's killing people a block away from each other. You see what I'm trying to say?
I get it. I totally get it. No, I get it.
Everybody's confused.
I get it. I'm shaking my head. I realize they don't know I'm shaking my head, but you know. I get it.
And then this doesn't necessarily mean anything, as we learned about on our Rocky Mountain Reckoning episode, where Wyoming is in a very low crime rate in comparison to other parts of the country. And yet we had every freaking serial killer in the known world operating here, apparently.
It's like they had a convention.
Yeah. So this doesn't necessarily mean one thing or another, but I do think it's worth bringing up, and that is that both Vermont and New Hampshire have pretty freaking low crime rates, especially in the rural areas. Vermont being 2 in 100,000 and New Hampshire being 1.9 in 100,000 in 2004. So that's a pretty low crime rate for an area. Yeah. And you know that it's a rural area, which means that it's going to be a lower crime rate than you have in urban areas. So it's got to be considered. You have completely different highways. You know, Vermont is on Route 118. New Hampshire's Route 112. The settings of them are totally different. We have Brianna, who just disappeared. We have no idea anything that happened. We don't even know how her car got there. Everything is a mystery. In Maura's case, it's not so much. We know that she wrecked her car. We know that another vehicle almost certainly was not involved in her wrecking her car, because if they had, then when Butch Atwood pulled up, Maura would have probably been like, let me in this freaking bus right now. There's a psychopath that just ran me off the road.
Exactly.
That didn't happen.
Or yes, try to call somebody because,
Yeah. I mean, she probably would have ran to a house. The the house that was right there and pounded on the door. It's just, I think we can say unequivocally, nobody ran Maura off the road.
Right.
She wrecked. And then if whatever happened because she was vulnerable and on the side of the road, or because she had somebody following her that had ill intentions, whatever. But I don't think that the wreck had anything to do with her disappearance other than it put her in a vulnerable situation. Brianna's is completely the opposite. I think the way that the car was found has everything to do with her disappearance. And I don't think that if it wasn't for whatever transpired to make her disappear, I don't think her car would have ever been in that house.
Yeah.
So the two in that instance, I think, are completely opposite. And then, with both of the girls, you also have the theory that both of them ran away. I think that in Maura's case, I believe that we covered that pretty effectively and determined that the likelihood of that is very close to zero. And in Brianna's case, I think you can say the likelihood of that is pretty much zero. I just don't think there's any possible way that she ran away on her own, So as far as the two cases being linked, could they be? Of course they could be. But if we were talking about the same situation in 1975, or if we were looking at cases that occurred in 1975 or in 1982 or something, I think that the likelihood of it being a serial killer with both of these, I know the likelihood would be considerably higher because that was the peak activity for serial killers. We've talked about this in other episodes where now serial killer activity is it's really low. So the likelihood of one serial killer happening upon two girls 90 miles apart, in 1980, the percentage chance of that would be very small. But in 2004, it's minuscule. So I think that, at least in my opinion, the cases should be investigated for any possible links to each other. But at the end of the day, I think it's very unlikely that the two are linked. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, or do you disagree? Or
no, I'm falling into that thought process as well.
So then the next thing we have to talk about is human trafficking. And we're going to focus on Brianna, but honestly,
that triggers me so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sick, sad freaking reality that we're living with in this world now. But we're talking about it in reference to Brianna's case, but obviously pretty much everything I say could apply to Maura's case as well. And that was a theory that was tossed out in Maura's case. We didn't jump into it in her episodes because I think it's a very remote chance. I think that the likelihood in Brianna's case is higher. And I say that simply because she was involved in the drug community, where oftentimes the two are linked. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes you'll have drug dealers that will get girls and women hooked on drugs to then make them vulnerable for trafficking. And we know that traffickers utilize drugs in keeping these girls stoned all the freaking time out of their minds so they can control them. So there is a definite link between drug use and being trafficked. And that's not just me saying that. That is
it's out there,
fact that happens. And so
keeps them pliable. They do what they're told.
Right. And it makes them susceptible to it because it puts them in a position where, first of all, if you're out of your mind, stoned on whatever drug, pick your poison, then you're not going to fight back. I mean, if you're going to be much more compliant, or if they promise, hey, I'm going to hook you up, hop in with me.
Yeah.
And they're probably telling them the truth. They do. They go get them high, and then they take them wherever the hell they take them, and they're gone. And so that's why I say in Brianna's case, I think that the opportunity for trafficking is a lot higher than it would be in Maura's case. I think in Maura's case, it's pretty unlikely unless they just kidnapped her and then got her into that world. But I mean, we talked about the unlikelihood of that when we were discussing her case. So the human trafficking thing in Brianna's case is possible, but I just gotta keep going back to that freaking car. The way that it was found, everything we talked about last week,
so weird,
makes me think that it's just so unlikely. But I'll tell you what, when you get to digging into Brianna's case, this is everywhere. It's pretty much on every one of those type of sites, like Web Sleuths or Reddit, or it's all over the freaking place that she was a victim of human trafficking. And they'll say that, I mean, I saw it in like news reports and shit, not just in the online communities, and citing the same things that I was just saying, that, she was in an unstable living environment. She's the perfect age group to be trafficked at 17. As sick and freaking nasty as it is to talk about, the younger that they can get these girls, the longer that they can make money off of them. So, at 17, she's kind of a higher target age than somebody that's 25, for instance, and the fact that she was living this transient lifestyle. I mean, when you say transient, it brings up ideas of like living on the street, but is all I mean is she was moving from place to place, and never staying at the same place twice. And so all of that kind of stuff definitely feeds into this idea that she was trafficked. And then in 2006, there was a report of a woman, there was a report that Brianna was seen in an Atlantic City casino on video camera. And they got the video evidence, and Kelly said when she viewed it, she was like, oh my God, that's Brianna. And so they really dug into it. So the girl did. I mean, you can see the video. It's out there available. And I think that it's on she was featured on one of the Disappeared episodes. And I believe that they show that video on that episode as well, if I remember right. But you can find it. It's out there. And the girl does look remarkably like Brianna. And if a mother looks at her and says, wow, I think that might be, then obviously she looks a lot like her. But the fact of the matter is regardless of what you find out there online, because you're going to find all kinds of shit, but regardless of what you find, the actual story is they found this woman and confirmed that it was not Brianna.
Okay.
And so I still see it in a lot of these discussions and stuff, people posting recently, like within the last week, that about this. But the fact of the matter is, it was not Brianna. We know that because we know who it was. Of course, they didn't say who it was, and they shouldn't. It was just some poor girl that was at a casino. So why should her name be thrown out there to the public? But the family knows for a fact that it wasn't Brianna. So, but you'll see it out there. And then, as far as any other sightings or anything, there's nothing ever been as credible as that one. In every one of these missing person cases, there's potential sightings. There's people that say, hey, I think I saw her here, or I think I saw her there, but nothing more credible than that. And the fact of the matter is it's crazy how many people look similar to each other.
Oh, yeah.
And then when you get to talking about, especially I would say,
everyone has a twin.
Well, everybody has a twin, but when you get to talking about young girls in this age group, they look a lot alike. They look a lot alike for a few different reasons. One, I think, teenagers that haven't really grown into their body completely yet, they all kind of look a little bit similar. But then styles are the
They
same
mimic each other,
within a certain age group. In between, if we're talking like between Maura and Brianna, they have a lot of similarities between the two of them. Even though they ran in different circles and stuff, they were in the same age category at the same time. So the styles that they wear, the clothing styles that they wear, all of that kind of stuff is going to be very similar. And, I told you that I was watching, maybe I didn't say this, but I said that I was like looking into the Idaho murder thing or whatever. I watched a documentary, which was out of this world good, really, really good. It's called One Night in Idaho, and it's on Amazon Prime. Well worth the watch. Just kind of not relevant, but
throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I liked about it is a 4-part series, and 1 part was on the piece of shit Brian Kohlberger. The other 3 parts were on the families and the victims, which I thought was really freaking cool. But the reason that I bring that up is, I mean, you see those girls, and of course their families all know them and everything, but looking at those girls, any one of those girls could be spotted and mistaken for the other one. I mean, they all look so much alike. And when you look at like the colleges when they're having the vigils and stuff, and you look out across that crowd, many of the boys you'd have a hard time telling them apart, and many of the girls you would have a hard time telling them apart. So the point is, when you have somebody missing, there's 100,000 people out there, especially in this age group, that look like that person. Now,
especially in a grainy CCTV video. Yeah.
But even in person, when you're talking about me, for instance, if I went missing, I'm an older guy, bald hair, I got a gray goatee, I'm pretty distinctive. I'm not saying that there's not other guys out there that have, similar facial hair and stuff than me, but by the time you're a grown adult, your looks are like yours.
Yeah.
You're not dressing like the rest of the crowd. You're dressing with what's comfortable or what you like or what works for your job, but it's completely different than the people around you. So you're much more distinct. And it's the same way with women. As they get older, we all get more distinct in our appearance. And so when you're talking about this age group, especially, somebody missing is bound to have multiple different sightings. And I mentioned this in Maura's case where, how many girls look exactly like her? You got a girl of that height, that weight, with dimples when she smiles and dark hair.
Yeah.
A cute girl that age. Yeah, there's probably 100,000 of them at the college that she's going to.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to really get off the rails on that. I just think that you can't put a lot of stock into any of the other sightings of Brianna, because it could be, and most likely is, somebody that's completely unrelated to that. And then, unfortunately, in order to answer this question and really try to speak on this with some semblance of knowledge, which I'm no expert when it comes to human trafficking, but I do try to at least,
glad for that. Yeah.
I do try to at least get the basics down so that I don't sound like a complete moron when I'm talking about it. And it's come up in multiple different cases that I've looked at over the years. And so unfortunately, I have had some exposure to the whole idea. And somebody being kidnapped like this and trafficked is rare as hell. It really is rare. I'm not saying it never happens. Of course it happens. And you could probably find some cases where you could prove it has happened. But the vast majority of the time, they are either lured with like false job promises, or another thing that these guys will do is they'll get a very attractive looking guy and, meet up with these girls on like like a Tinder or one of those dating apps or something like that, and then lure them in with like romantic manipulation and then get them into a traffic situation. Yeah. But by far the most common use, or the most common way, is like I alluded to a little bit ago, and that is, and we're pretty sure that happened to one of the missing and murdered indigenous women that disappeared from Billings is we're pretty positive that because she was a drug user, she was living in a homeless shelter, and so she was living a transient lifestyle on drugs, when we're pretty sure that somebody either used drugs to lure her by, saying, hey, I'll get you high if you come with me, or got her high and pliable and then loaded her in a truck and she's gone.
Yeah.
And that's by far the most common thing. Now, could Ryans and Jackson have been linked up with some sort of a human trafficking type situation?
Yes.
You're damn right they could have. And
because they're going to want to make more money, and drugs isn't enough.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, yeah.
But why do it this way? You have a girl that is experimenting with drugs already. Just get her hooked.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think
maybe she was thinking about quitting because she was thinking about college.
Maybe. But my point is, why go to this extreme?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I'm just throwing it out there.
Because
so I can make faces. I don't know.
The other part of that too is I had no indication that she was quitting. I think
right.
I think that she was using on a somewhat regular basis as an occasional user. But even if she was, they were kind of within her circle of friends. So it would be much safer to get her at a house party or something like that and kidnap her from there than to leave her car in this weird ass thing that's going to draw all kinds of attention to it. One thing with traffickers is they don't want to draw attention to the fact. They want to be out of the country or, 3 states away or whatever before it's even recognized that the girl is gone. Yeah. And when you leave what is essentially a crime scene, you would expect, if it wouldn't have been the dumbass state cop that showed up there, you would have expected as the perpetrator that this is going to be viewed as a crime scene. I mean, this is weird as shit.
Yeah.
I would assume that it would be viewed as a crime scene if, I was the guy that was responsible. I think anybody would. So I just think it's pretty freaking unlikely. Unfortunately, we do have to talk about some numbers. I'll try not to bore the shit out of you too much, but, the risk of being a subject of or a victim of human trafficking in the United States is estimated at 0.0035%. So that's 11,500 cases out of 330 million. But that's annually. I mean, that's a lot of people. So I'm certainly not discounting it or making it not seem important. And then when you talk about the younger group, which I said earlier, when you're talking about females age 15 to 25, their risk is even higher. It goes all the way up to 0.01 to 0.02%. And so they're at a much higher risk for it for sure. But then you also have to look at rural areas versus urban areas. So an area like Montgomery has a much lower trafficking rate. It's estimated at 0.001%. And then urban areas are higher, as high as 0.05%. And so that's just due to the fact that there's less of an organized crime infrastructure there. I mean, there's just not a place to move these girls to quickly and easily to make them disappear.
Under the radar.
It's a much higher risk for you to take a girl from a rural area than it is from an urban area. And then you have your high risk groups of like runaways, foster care, chronic drug users, stuff like that. Brianna may have kind of been at a more of an elevated risk because of her transient living arrangements and the fact that she was involved with the drug community, but it's still a pretty low risk. I would say between 0.1 and 0.5%. So, and that's according to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So that's not me just making up numbers. That's, that would be the official estimate for a high risk youth in that age that age range of 15 to 25. So still less than a 1% chance, which is pretty freaking small.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So I would say that there's about maybe a 5 to 10% chance that that Brianna's profile could be considered as fitting tracking vulnerabilities, but there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that she was trafficked. And then okay, the latest study that I could find was 2023, and that reported that 30% of trafficking victims have been identified through the National Human Trafficking Hotline, or they've escaped, or they've been rescued. And that leaves about 70% of suspected trafficking victims that we never heard from again. And those numbers really surprised the shit out of me, because I honestly expected to see almost the complete obverse of that. I kind of figured the vast majority of human trafficking victims, I don't know how to say this in a nice way, outlive their usefulness. They basically age out of that target age, and then are essentially just kind of kicked out onto the street to leave them to their own devices.
Or by then they're groomed enough that they help find the new ones.
Or whatever. But apparently that's not the case, because like I said, as high as 70% are never seen again or heard from again. So it's much higher than I really thought. But I still think that it's very unlikely that neither Maura or Brianna were victims of human trafficking. And I say that mostly just because they really don't fit that mold of easily being taken. They were kidnapped, for lack of a better term, you know. I think that we've pretty effectively covered every angle that we set out to talk about tonight. I don't think that either one of them were victims of a serial killer. We've talked about the reasons why. I don't really think that either of them were victims of human trafficking. We've talked about that. So what are your thoughts? Where are you at this point with all of it?
Confusion. That's just the only answer I have, is confusion. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Well, I do know that statistically, you're much, much, much more likely to be harmed by somebody that you know than somebody that you don't know. You know, stranger on stranger, violent crimes like this, abductions and murders, are exceedingly rare. Of course they happen. And when they do happen, they scare the shit out of all of us, you know. And I've referred to like the killings at Idaho for a couple reasons. One, I kind of have a hard and fast rule that I don't talk about cases until the trial's over and everything. And so we know the piece of shit's guilty, so it kind of frees it up to have the conversation at this point. Two, it's kind of at the forefront of my mind because I have recently watched that documentary and kind of looked into it a little bit.
Yeah.
And because I think that Kohberger is a serial killer that just got caught before he was able to kill anybody else. But I do believe that sick son of a bitch, if he would have gotten away with this, would have done it again. And so I think that it's relevant because it's the most recent serial killer arrest that I'm aware of.
Do you think he would have targeted more people exactly the same type, or more people that he knew?
I think that his whole thing was, and he's never said a shitting thing, so we're just left to guess. But I think his whole thing was the same as Murder by Numbers, the movie with Sandra Bullock. I think he wanted to prove that he could commit a crime, that he could commit a murder and get away with it because of his criminology background and everything. Yeah. And then the other thing that was mentioned in that documentary is that he was an involuntary celibate. An incel. Yep. And so apparently...
An addict girls.
He hated women, yeah. And apparently he's like held up as some sick freaking superstar in that world.
Yeah, what is it?
Because there's a whole group of these worthless pieces of shit that blame women because they're freaking creepy and weird and no women wants to give them the time of day. So I do believe that he would have continued to kill and probably would have done, much the same as he did. I think he only killed the boy because the boy was there. I don't think that he would have ever sought out a male to kill.
Yeah.
But I think that he would have been like Ed Kemper and Ted Bundy. I think he would have kept killing college-age sorority girls specifically because that's what he couldn't have. And ironically, with all of these freaking losers is if they just not be creepy and weird, they probably could get a date with a sorority girl. Maybe not the prom queen, but but they're creepy
and so damn creepy.
But they're creepy and they're weird, and women get a bad vibe from them. That's why they don't want nothing to do with them. And so serial killers are exceedingly rare in this country anymore. And I don't really know why, but I have a suspicion that it's because they're being caught before they can become serial killers. Yeah. They're like one-off killers at this point, like this freaking weirdo in Idaho. And it's simply because technology has brought us to a place where they're able to be caught the first time. I think that case is really fascinating because it's really a case study in the advanced forensics technology that we have now, because they used everything at their disposal. They used genetic genealogy to locate his father, and then they went to the dad's house and stole the garbage and were able to identify the father's DNA. And through that, they were able to find this piece of shit. So, I don't know if we have less serial killers or we just have a higher percentage of them that are getting caught the first time. But I think that it's very unlikely that either Brianna or Maura were the victim of serial killers. I think that it's very unlikely that they were the victim of human trafficking. Mm-hmm. I think that the highest likelihood, like we discussed in Maura's case, is that she was killed by somebody that she knew. I think that's probably the most likely, that she had made plans to meet up with somebody. And I would say that the next would be a one-off local type of person. And then when we're talking about Brianna, I feel I would probably say at least 80 to 90% certain that she was killed by somebody that she knew. And that's, like I discussed last week, the fact that they were able to get her to pull over, which is what I think happened.
Yeah.
At the Dutchburn house. I think it was somebody that she knew and trusted. Whoever that is, I have no freaking idea. Did you have something to add?
Oh, Elliot Rogers, the incel hero.
That psycho son of a bitch. He was obsessed with that guy.
Yeah. And now people are saying that Kohberger is becoming the next incel hero because Elliot's dead.
Yeah, he killed himself. But Kohberger...
Some of the videos he left, though. Ugh.
Oh, yeah, and his whole weird-ass manifesto.
Yes.
All of his weird psycho shit. But, I mean, they're just freaking losers. It's really what it boils down to.
He was the incel hero.
Yeah. And now this piece of shit's going to be the next... I'm not even going to say incel hero. He's going to be the next, king of the losers, because that's essentially what we're talking about. We're talking about freaking losers that can't get a date.
Yeah.
And they're pissed off at somebody else for it. So
the Chads and the Stacys is what they call them.
You're going to have to explain. I have no clue what you're
Okay, so the Chads, the jocks, the guys who can get the girls, they're mad at the Chads.
Okay.
The Stacys are the girls who are, the hot, won't give them the time of day, chasing after the Chads, lusting after the Chads. So Chads and Stacys are what they call them, the people that they hate in this situation.
And they're such losers that, and it sounds like you know a lot more about this than I do. I don't know a whole ton about it. Unfortunately, now I'm going to have to learn about it. But it sounds to me like they're like the losers we talked about in
Look at me in that tone of voice. I don't know what you're thinking.
The girl in Kentucky that disappeared that we did the case on, that not Holly Bobo, but the other one,
Brooklyn Farthing.
Brooklyn Farthing. Yeah. Like we were talking about with that loser that, I feel pretty certain killed Brooklyn Farthing.
Oh yeah, that guy.
You know, he's an older guy that's showing up at high school parties. This is
He
the
was
kind
incelish too.
These are the kind of losers that we're talking about. The kind that hold on to this high school or college age grudge until they're 70.
Yeah.
And
Still wearing their varsity jacket.
right. And my point is, I only say that because the Stacys and the Chads only apply in a school setting. As soon as you graduate via college or high school, that shit disappears so freaking fast.
Yeah.
It's not even funny.
And if it doesn't, then you're still involved and you're one of those
Weirdos.
Yeah.
Because for the rest of the world, that shit disappears almost immediately as soon as you get out. I mean, yeah, it lasts for a year or two, maybe after the fact.
Some of it goes to college with you. But
well, that's what I'm saying. If you leave high school and go into college, it pretty much stays throughout the college, as long as, you know, you go to a college that has a sports team.
yeah.
You know, if you don't, it's not nearly as relevant.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, a lot of colleges don't have sororities and shit like that. So we're talking about universities that have sororities, that have college teams where that kind of shit can be perpetuated for another however many years. But the reality of it is, for the vast majority of the world, that's just not the way it is at all.
Yeah.
You know, in reality,
once you become a worker bee, you lose the Stacy and the Chad.
Yeah, you really do. And you'll see, I mean, it's kind of the subject of a lot of, I don't know, Lifetime movies or whatever, but there is a reality to the fact that, you know, the guy that wasn't the quarterback ends up with the prom queen.
Yep.
In their 30s or whatever, because he's got a stable job, he's making money, he's reliable.
Yeah.
And so all of that shit just completely disappears. It's not important anymore. And so if they're still hooked up into that whole, it's just in their minds. There's no reality to it.
Yeah.
Like I said, they could take a bath, get out of mom's basement, and they could probably go out and get a date. But they don't. They sit in their mom's basement and get on the computer and talk to other freaking losers that are sitting around feeling sorry for themselves.
Yep.
Is essentially where it's at. But anyway, that's where I'm at with this particular one. I don't think that it can be discounted. Like I said, I think that you've got to consider the fact that Maura and Brianna could be linked, but this long after the fact, I think it's very unlikely. And the fact that it stops with just these two is just more indication to me that it was just a random coincidence. Now, if we're talking now over the last 20 years, if we have, this serial killer would have potentially had a cooling off period of roughly 30 days. And so we should have a huge number of victims in this area. And even if his cooling off period's extended, we should still have, I don't know, I would say a bare minimum of 10 victims.
Right.
We don't. We have these two. Right. And so I don't find a link there. The human trafficking thing we covered pretty extensively. I don't think that it really applies here. I think that I'm really at the same place that I was last week, that I think that she was probably kidnapped and murdered by somebody that she knew, be it in her friend circle or within her community.
Yeah.
So when we talk about serial killers, there's a certain cinematic shadow that falls across the conversation. Israel Keyes, Brian Rooney, Howard Godfrey, names that come with darkness built in. Monsters who didn't just kill, but planned, stalked, manipulated, and vanished into the fog. It's tempting. Hell, it's easy to look at Brianna Maitland's disappearance and place it within that framework. The abandoned car, the missing girl, the eerie stillness of a rural highway. It feels like the work of a predator. Someone calculated, someone practiced. But I don't buy it. We look at the possibilities. Israel Keyes was in Vermont around that time, but the FBI ruled him out because he was in Utah when this happened. And frankly, his patterns just don't fit. Brian Rooney, convicted in the murder of Michelle Gardner Quinn, had a history of violence against women, but he was a rapist of opportunity, not a ghost. Howard Godfrey, who murdered Patricia Scoville and left her body in the woods, convicted, yeah. A monster? Absolutely, but still not likely to be behind what happened to Brianna. When we considered the possibility of an unknown serial killer, one operating quietly along Route 118 or in the broader Northeast, but speculation without evidence just becomes noise. And this case has enough of that. Here's what I keep coming back to. The way this crime was perpetrated doesn't feel like the work of a stranger. It feels personal. It feels sudden. And it feels like trust that was exploited. Brianna left her job that night and drove toward the unknown. She was expected home. She never arrived. Her car wasn't dumped in a ravine. It wasn't set on fire. It was staged or left there, like a warning or a message or a cover-up. Whoever did this didn't snatch her off the dark corner or stalk her from the shadows. They knew her, or at the very least, she knew them. We've covered the drug connections. We've looked at the people in her life, the fights, the friends, the fractured support systems, and now we've dissected the serial killer theory. And yet, the theory that sits heaviest in my gut is the one where Brianna pulled over to meet someone she trusted, and they didn't let her leave. These theories are not just puzzle pieces. We're not just trying to fit shapes into holes. We're trying to trace a truth, one that makes sense of a disappearance that has baffled even seasoned investigators, one that respects who Brianna was. Not a plot point in someone else's twisted theory, not prey for a passing monster, but a 17-year-old girl navigating adulthood, uncertainty, and some very real dangers around her. She didn't just disappear. She was taken. And somewhere, someone knows exactly how and why. And that's the person we're going to keep chasing. It's easy to lose someone like Brianna Maitland in the fog of speculation. Her case is dissected on forums. Her name is paired with the theories that turn her life into a footnote of someone else's crime story. But that's not who she was. Brianna was motion. She was light and grit, all tangled together. 17 and halfway grown, with the kind of independent streak that could both protect and isolate you. She wasn't just disappeared. She was trying to find footing, trying to find peace. She worked 2 jobs. She studied for her GED. She laughed with her friends and moved through the world with guarded hope. She was young, but not naive, stronger than people often give her credit for. She had dreams, a future that reached far beyond Montgomery, Vermont. She talked about traveling, about building a life on her own terms. But those conversations were cut short. Someone took that from her, and we don't get to let that be the end of her story. We talk a lot on this show about injustice, about silence, about cases that were mishandled or misunderstood. But this isn't just about solving a mystery. It's about remembering who was lost, who she was. Brianna was a daughter, a friend, a teenager trying to make it on her own in a world that didn't make room for girls like her. She had fears and flaws, just like all of us, but she mattered. Her story deserves more than clickbait. Her name deserves more than echoing in empty theories. She deserves truth. And until that day comes, we speak her name not as a question mark, but as a promise. Brianna Alexandria Maitland, and we haven't forgotten you, and we won't.
If this episode left you with more questions than answers, you're not alone. We've sifted through serial offender profiles, overlapping timelines, and the eerie similarities between two young women who vanished without a trace, and still so much remains unknown.
And that's exactly why we keep talking about it, because cases like Brianna's get filed away, misinterpreted, dismissed. The deeper you dig, the more you see cracks, not just in the evidence, but in how we respond to women who disappear.
If you believe in justice, real justice, not just headlines, then you can be part of that effort. Share this episode, rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It helps more than you know.
And if you want to go further, you can support the mission directly. Join us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Subscribe to our Substack or get involved with the Adopt a Victim Initiative or the Dark Dialogue Collective. Every voice matters, and your support helps keep these stories alive and grounded in truth.
You can find all the links at darkdialogue.com or reach out to us directly at info@darkdialogue.com. Whether you're a listener, a researcher, or someone who just can't stop thinking about these cases, we see you. You're not alone.
Next episode, we'll explore the theories that have haunted this case from day one and the ones hiding in plain sight. Until then, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep the dialogue alive.